hello, and good evening. I am Sam, and you are listening to Literacy, where, in a bit, we'll be carrying on with the Human Chord, which we would have carried on with last week, but I made the decision not to. Hi, hello, how are we doing? I was going to say, Llama, it's just you in chat. Andy Pants, also, hello, hi, welcome. I mean, no, actually, no, if you're listening on YouTube, to the VOD on YouTube, good grief, what a bustling and just what a busy, hype-filled chat. No, it's two people, including three people, including myself. Greek, also, hello, hi. I know, it's fine. Dave's playing cat game. Last week you were all busy walking into Mordor, indeed, exactly. And who am I to stand in the way of such progress? Yeah, hi, hello. Falcon French probably going to lurk and watch Stray when the story starts. Yeah, no worries. That's absolutely fine. I do this to make light of things. It is completely fine. It is entirely your own prerogatives to watch whatever you feel like. That's completely okay. But actually, while I speak for such things, let's just get this important business. There's my very clever. Oh, look, me with a 39-month sub. Hi, hello. Good grief, we've been in this for, I guess, 39 months, 38 months. I don't know. Yeah, no worries at all. Do please lurk however you like. You don't have to be here. If hey, maybe you just want to watch one channel. That's fine. Maybe you want to watch no channel. Stick on Netflix. I'm not your boss. Yeah, do what you feel like. Dave is obviously playing the cat game, and I respect the desire to watch such things. So, I'm stuck on that phrase this evening, apparently. Okay, we're going to drop that one. Perola, also hello, welcome in. How's everybody? How are we all doing? It's very weather here. There's been... There was talk... I mean, there was talk of, like, snow appearing. And the snow appeared before the snow was meant to appear. And then on the day that the snow was actually meant to appear, it was just kind of nothing. And now it is storm, which is just a lot of wind and some rain. So none of this is really what I wanted. Like the snow that did show up, certainly here, was a little bit exciting until it just didn't settle. And so it was gone later that day, and that's probably the only snow that I will see for the next, 4 years. So yeah, it's about the shape of things lately. It's kind of disappointing. You feel doubly obligated to cat game because it was requested. I mean, again, do what pleases you. Please do. Just watch the cat game. That's completely fine. You played and played the cat game so many times. See, I haven't. I've kind of been avoiding it because I figured it's one that I would play at some point, and now I've just sort of come to accept that there's about 700 games that I have in that list. I can probably let one or two of them go and just watch someone else play them instead. That's fine. So yeah, I apologise to anyone who's been streaming cat game previously and I've not been able to watch their stream for those reasons, but it's okay. No, that's just alright. I'm just curious about what is floating in the top of my tea, but I think it is just a little island. Yeah, it's a little island of mint leaves, because it's mint tea, not other tea randomly spawning mint leaves. Stephen, hello, welcome in. Funnily enough, someone who I was just thinking of when saying apologies to those who have been streaming cat game in the past that I've not been able to watch your stream, because I was intending to play it myself, and now I've decided, nah, that one can go. Because I do remember actively oh no, I can't watch your stream because you're playing cat game, and I'm you know how it is. Yeah, anyway. Thank you very much for the 33 sub? What? Yeah, 33 months of subscriptions. We could call that 33 subscriptions as well, I guess. I don't know. Just for one person. Apparently it's going to get warmer there in Sweden. So that 40 centimetres of snow will turn to ice and water. Yay, exciting. I mean, it's up to 15 degrees today, which is, frankly, almost cold summer weather. So yeah, it was down. We've had like a 10-degree jump with this storm coming in, so that's normal and a healthy thing for a climate to do. That's fine. Oh, you had snow up there today? Oh, I'm jealous. I don't know how you are with the snow, whether you're someone who likes and appreciates the snow, or because I know more than enough people who are like, bleh, hate snow. So, yeah. Me, when it's snowing, I'm you love it. You never really had any growing up. Same. I am like face to the window. I fully turn into a child when it snows, because likewise we'd get it like once every few years, and obviously for a child, something happening even a year apart is a lifetime. So having to wait multiple years before another decent snowfall is just unthinkable. And so yeah, I remember, I think, one good snowstorm from my childhood where we had enough to be like I have, yes, memories of, the typical power cut and everyone having to, like, in my family, like, sleep, like, making beds and, like, all sleeping in the living room downstairs to keep each other warm and stuff. And by day, like, my brother and sister going to, like, other, like, basically going around to other houses of their friends in the village to take their snow, like working with them to like gather up snow into a massive, and I was a kid, so it probably wasn't as big as I remember, but it was pretty enormous, like a giant snowball, rolling it down the street back to our house, where they sat with like plastic ice cream tubs to like carve it into blocks, and then making an igloo in the garden, which actually lasted for a good while. And that's like the one good memory of a childhood snowfall that I have. There will have been others, but like that's the one that's, branded in there. Yeah, it was really cool, and so obviously it's like, oh great, we can do this every year. No. And yeah, so. Oh, so you're saying, Llama, mint tea is the best, and then talking about warmer temps to storm caused by warm air coming from Morocco, specifically according to weather people. No, that's okay. I mean, funnily, on the subject of tea and Morocco, it is literally Moroccan mint tea that I'm drinking right now. So, that completes the circle, and we can all happily move on with our lives. You always get used to a big snowdrift right behind your garage, and you dig out a tunnel from the back garage door. Nice. You've got to make one snowman the entire time you lived in Ireland? Wow. Then I'm sorry that you've had, even less of that experience than me. Ooh. Moving lights that shouldn't be moving. Good choice, thank you. Thank you, I try. I like mint tea, but there are times that I feel it register in my brain as if I'm drinking toothpaste. And it's not a knock on the tea, it's just my own, I think, inner processing that goes, this is a toothpaste flavour of mint. And it can be hard to escape once that registers. But it's, I was, chatting about it to Lucy last night, and she said, when you want mint tea, nothing else hits the same, so. Apologies for any slurping going into the mic. I hope not. Right. What do I do now? Now is normally when I guess I should start reading, because I think we've got a fair bit to go tonight. That sounds like I'm doing the rest of the book. No, we've got quite a lot of book to go still. It's just every so often brains are weird and unhelpful. Ain't that the truth? Oh boy, it's been a bit of a week for that, let me say. Yeah, but don't worry, we got through it. It's nearly the end of November, and I hope that everybody has remembered not to Vember this month, because it's important. Yeah. So, should we have a story? Should we carry on with the story? Where did we get to last time? Actually, that thing that I need to do normally. Where do we go? We go to there and we go... Also, yeah, before I start pinning things to the top of chat, if you would like to click on a jigsaw and do some jigsaws, Parola has your link there. You haven't remembered once? Nice, good going. This has no links to chapters, so that's great. We are going from chapter 2. You were just remembering? Well, I mean, better late than never, you know. Or something, I don't know. You were cold, but the dog is sleeping on your blanket. Oh, can you, like, arrange some sort of you blanket dog configuration? Looking forward to getting all the sembering out of your life next month. Oh yeah, just go absolutely sember wild in quick maths. How, 7 days? 30 days has September, April, June, and November. Must have 31 except February when it's a leap year, and then you don't, unless it's 29 or 20. Yeah, that's the rhyme, right? Seems legit. Good. Yeah, great. It's an easy one to remember. Everyone knows it. That's literally like how I was taught it. Like this really goes off the rails past a point, doesn't it? Like there's no meter to this. Right, yes, we had read chapter 1 of the Human Chord, in which our protagonist, Robert Spin Robin, that's the name, right? That's what you're called? Robert Spin Robin has answered a job application to traipse off to the middle of nowhere, Wales. That means pretty much how it's defined. And to hang out with a large, loud, extremely bearded clergyman called Mr. Philip Scale. And the other 2 people who reside in his house, one of whom is Mrs. Maule, who is deaf, and the other is Miriam, who Robert is immediately attracted to. But, you know, in the story, in terms of the story, it's kind of a little bit more, like, kind of supernaturally attracted to each other, because this is all about sound and like true names, and there's Scale is conducting some kind of experiment which we don't know too much about yet within the story, into using sound to manipulate and control things around him. So it's gonna get weird, I think. We've forgotten pretty much everything about this, so summary is very much needed. Bad news! I've been reading this, but I'm also very, very bad at retaining information. Well, no, that's not true. I retain the information, I just don't have the filing system. That's what I've come to accept about myself. Hey Sam, do you think you have ADHD? Probably what? So that's... Sorry, Joey's also here now. The other distraction. You want... ADHD brains lack librarians. Yeah, like... Just this little bit helped? Okay, good. Well then I'm glad we've done that much. Yeah, that's I think pretty much where we're up to. Like the other problem that I'm fighting against is because I've been reading on ahead. So therefore I need to try and remember what's happened up to this point in the story rather than just tell you everything that happens next. Because that's, if I do that, then we can just all go early, you know. Yeah. So I think that's really about as far as we've got. We've had our intriguing premise set up, and now we head into chapter 2. I just check in. I don't have any no sudden messages, no fires that I need to quickly put out or anything. No, all good. Everything's well. Lucy's out this evening, by the way, so I'm not sure she's going to appear. So, you know, if anything weird happens in chat, I'll just deal with it when I deal with it. But yeah, if we're all ready... you know what, my tea is pretty much cold. I'm just going to finish this quickly in 1 second. Good, we got through it without any limescale. What do you want, my love? You're wanting to jump up? Because you're just going to sit there scratching my leg, aren't you? You coming up? You jumping up then? I'll have chat open in case anything catches fire. Well, oh yeah, yeah. I was going to say. I mean, presumptuous. Yeah, no, that's fine. This is... We've made this situation for ourselves. It's fine. Mind everyone, this chair is falling apart. The armrest on it now is like... Ooh. Yeah, the armrest is literally falling apart as I interact with it. So that's cool. If anything comes up, you can just push the bad stuff up with chat and emotes and stuff. Good thinking, thank you. And I'll just think, wow, chat's popping off. You're really vibing with this. Please. 1 second. I have a needy cat. Well, don't ask for that which you do not want. There we go. Right. Yeah, now I'm going to sit like this and you don't like it because you are right into the microphone. Good. Look, we've got a lot of reading to do and I've been here for nearly 20 minutes. Okay. If we are ready... Yeah, Joey Chat says hi. You going to purr into the mic? No, you're just going to accept your head scritches gratefully. Telling him to make sense. He can make sense. He knows how. He just chooses not to. Oh yeah, also again, reminder, because the other kind of reminder for old-timey language. Nothing offensive, but just the occasional word that's like had its meaning changed a little bit in modern parlance. And so, whereas for the time that this was written, their use of, we're just going to say it quickly and just rip that plaster off, sounding they are talking about a more sort of audible acoustic action. Nothing else, please do not look that up. They use it in all... It's not even innocence. It didn't have another meaning at the time, probably. I don't know. I'm not a linguistic historian. I'm just... Okay, so we've done that bit. Yeah, I don't know. Giggle away if you like. Anyway. Now Joey is squeaking into the mic. Good. Still has several normal meanings. You think I'm just internet poisoned? I am internet poisoned. I can't escape this. My problem is, I know that a lot of other people are also internet poisoned. And so, like, yeah. No, I can't work. No, I was going to make a reference to another one, and like, you know, mob henchmen and stuff, and how it's ruined their vocation. But anyway, we're going to go on now with... Wait, no, look, I'm reading. Right. Serious face on now. Okay. If we are ready, I'm going to put on the reading voice, and we're going to continue with The Human Chord by Algernon Blackwood. Chapter 2. For some minutes, they sat in front of the fire and sipped their coffee in silence. The secretary felt that the sliding platform on which he was travelling into this extraordinary adventure had been going a little too fast for him. Events had crowded past before he had time to look squarely at them. He had lost his bearings, rather, routed by Miriam's beauty and by the amazing way she talked to him. Had she lived always inside his thoughts, she could not have chosen words better calculated to convince him that they were utterly in sympathy with one another. Mr. Scale, moreover, approved heartily. The one thing Spin Robin saw clearly through it all was that himself and Miriam, their voices rather, were necessary for the success of the clergyman's mysterious experiments. Only, while Miriam, little witch, knew all about it, he, candidate on trial, knew, as yet, nothing. And now, as they sat opposite one another in the privacy of the library, Spin Robin, full of confidence and for once proud of his name and personality, looked forward to being taken more into the heart of the affair. Things advanced, however, more slowly than he desired. Mr. Scale's scheme was too big to be hurried. The clergyman did not smoke, but his companion, with the other's ready permission, puffed gently at a small cigarette. Short, rapid puffs he took, as though the smoke was afraid to enter beyond the front teeth. With one finger he incessantly knocked off the ashes into his saucer, even when none were there to fall. On the table behind them gurgled the shaded lamp, lighting their faces from the eyes downwards. "Now," said Mr. Scale, evidently not aware that he thundered, "we can talk quietly and undisturbed." He caught his beard in a capacious hand in such a way that the square outline of his chin showed through the hair. His voice boomed musically, filling the room. Spin Robin listened acutely, afraid even to cross his legs. A genuine pronouncement, he felt, was coming. "A good many years ago, Mr. Spin Robin," he said simply, "when I was a curate of a country parish in Norfolk, I made a discovery of a revolutionary description, a discovery in the world of real things, that is, of spiritual things." He gazed fixedly over the clutched beard at his companion, apparently searching for brief, intelligible phrases. "But a discovery, the development of which I was obliged to put on one side until I inherited with this property the means and leisure which enabled me to continue my terrific, I say purposely terrific, researches. For some years now I have been quietly at work here, absorbed in my immense pursuit." And again he stopped. "I have reached a point, Mr. Spin Robin." "Yes?" interjected the secretary, as though the mention of his name touched a button and produced a sound. "A point?" "Where I need the assistance of someone with a definite quality of voice, a man who emits a certain note, a certain tenor note." He released his beard so that it flew out with a spring, at the same moment thrusting his head forward to drive home the announcement effectively. Spin Robin crossed his legs with a fluttering motion, hastily. "As you advertised," he suggested. The clergyman bowed. "My efforts to find the right man," continued the enthusiast, leaning back in his chair, "have now lasted a year. I have had a dozen men down here, each on a month's trial. None of them suited. None had the requisite quality of voice. With a single exception, none of them could stand the loneliness, the seclusion, and without exception, all of them were too worldly to make sacrifices. It was the salary they wanted. The majority, moreover, confused imagination with fancy, and courage with mere audacity. And, most serious of all, not one of them passed the test of Miriam. She harmonized with none of them. They were discords, one and all. You, Mr. Spin Robin, are the first to win acceptance. The instant she heard your name, she cried for you. And she knows. She sings the soprano. She took you into the chord." "I hope, indeed," stammered the flustered and puzzled secretary, and then stopped, blushing absurdly. "You claim for me far more than I should dare to claim for myself," he added. The reference to Miriam delighted him and utterly destroyed his judgment. He longed to thank the girl for having approved him. "I'm glad my voice suits your chord." In his heart of hearts he understood something of what Mr. Scale was driving at, yet was half ashamed to admit it even to himself. In this 20th century, it all seemed so romantic, mystical and absurd. He felt it was all half true. If only he could have run back into the great mental prairie of his boyhood days, it might all have been quite true. "Precisely," continued Mr. Scale, bringing him back to reality. "Precisely. And now, before I tell you more, you will forgive my asking you one or two personal questions, I'm sure. We must build securely as we go, leaving nothing to chance. The grandeur and importance of my experiments demand it. Afterwards," and his expression changed to a sudden softness in a way that was characteristic of the man, "you must feel free to put similar questions to me, as personal and direct as you please. I wish to establish a perfect frankness between us at the start." "Thank you, Mr. Scale. Of course. Should anything occur to me to ask?" A momentary bewilderment, caused by the great visage so close to his own, prevented the completion of the sentence. "As to your beliefs, for instance," the clergyman resumed abruptly. "Your religious beliefs, I mean. I must be sure of you on that ground." "What are you?" "Nothing, I think," Spin Robin replied without hesitation, remembering how his soul had bounced its way among the various creeds since Cambridge, and arrived at its present state of belief in everything, yet without any definite label. "Nothing in particular. Nominally, though, a Christian." "You believe in a god?" "A supreme intelligence, most certainly," was the emphatic reply. "And spirits?" Spin Robin hesitated. He was a very honest soul. "Other life, let me put it," the clergyman helped him. "Other beings besides ourselves." "I have often wondered rather," he answered carefully, "whether there might not be other systems of evolution besides humanity. Such extraordinary forces come blundering into one's life sometimes, and one can't help wondering where they come from. I have never formulated any definite beliefs, however." "Your world is not a blind chaos, I mean," Mr. Scale put gravely to him as though questioning a child. No, indeed. There's order and system." "In which you personally count for something of value?" asked the other quickly. "I like to think so," was the apologetic reply. "There's something that includes me somewhere in a purpose of very great importance. Only, of course, I've got to do my part, and—" "Good!" Mr. Scale interrupted him. "And now," he asked softly after a moment's pause, leaning forward, "what about death? Are you afraid of death?" Spin Robin started visibly. He began to wonder where this extraordinary catechism was going to lead. But he answered at once. He had thought out these things and knew where he stood. "Only if it's possible pain," he said, smiling into the bearded visage before him, "and an immense curiosity, of course." "It does not mean extinction for you? Going out like the flame of a candle, for instance?" "I've never been able to believe that, Mr. Scale. I continue somewhere and somehow, forever." The cross-examination puzzled him more and more, and through it, for the first time, he began to feel dimly, ran a certain strain of something not quite right, not permissible in the biggest sense. It was not the questions themselves that produced this odd and rather disquieting impression, but the fact that Mr. Scale was preparing the ground with such extraordinary thoroughness. This conversation was the first swell, as it were, rolling mysteriously in upon him from the ocean in whose deeps the great experiment lay buried. Forces, tidal in strength, oceanic in volume, shrouded it just now, but he already felt them. They reached him through the person of the clergyman. It was these forces playing through his personality that Spin Robin had been aware of the first moment they met on the station platform, and had sensed even more strongly during the walk home across the mountains. Behind the play of these darker impressions, as yet only vague and ambiguous, there ran in and out among his thoughts the vein of something much sweeter. Miriam, with her large grey eyes and silvery voice, was continually peeping in upon his mind. He wondered where she was and what she was doing in the big, lonely house. He wished she could have been in the room to hear his answers and approve them. He felt incomplete without her. Already he thought of her as the melody to which he was the accompaniment, two things that ought not to be separated. "My point is," Mr. Scale continued, "that, apart from ordinary human ties and so forth, you have no intrinsic terror of death, of losing your present body." No, was the reply, more faintly given than the rest. "I love my life, but... He looked about him in some confusion for the right words, still thinking of Miriam. "But I look forward, Mr. Scale. I look forward." He dropped back into the depths of his armchair and puffed swiftly at the end of his extinguished cigarette, oblivious to the fact that no smoke came. "The attitude of a brave man," said the clergyman with approval. Then, looking straight into the secretary's blue eyes, he added with increased gravity, "And therefore it would not be immoral of me to expose you to an experiment in which the penalty of a slip would be death? Or you would not shrink from it yourself, provided the knowledge to be obtained seemed worthwhile?" "That's right, sir. Mr. Scale, I mean, that's right," came the answer after an imperceptible pause. The result of the talk seemed to satisfy the clergyman. "You must think my questions very peculiar," he said, the sternness of his face relaxing a little. "But it was necessary to understand your exact position before proceeding further. The gravity of my undertaking demands it. However, you must not let my words alarm you." He waited a moment, reflecting deeply. "You must regard them, if you will, as a kind of test," he resumed, searching his companion's face with eagle eyes. "The beginning of a series of tests in which your attitude to Miriam, and hers to you, so far as that goes, was the first." "Oh, that's all right, Mr. Scale," was his inadequate rejoinder. For the moment the name of the girl was introduced, his thoughts instantly wandered out to find her. The way the clergyman pronounced it increased its power, too, for no name he uttered sounded ordinary. There seemed a curious mingling of the resonant cavity of his great mouth, of the fundamental note in the overtones. "Yes, you have the kind of courage that is necessary," Mr. Scale was saying, half to himself, "modesty that forgets self, and the unworldly attitude that is essential. With your help I may encompass success, and I consider myself wonderfully fortunate to have found you. Wonderfully fortunate." "I'm glad," murmured Spin Robin, thinking that so far he had not learned anything very definite about his duties, or what it was he had to do to earn so substantial a salary. Truth to tell, he did not bother much about that part of it. He was conscious only of three main desires: to pass the unknown tests, to learn the nature of Mr. Scale's discovery with the experiment involved, and to be with Miriam as much as possible. The whole affair was so unusual that he had already lost the common standards of judging. He let the sliding platform take him where it would, and he flattered himself that he was not fool enough to mistake originality for insanity. The clergyman, the dreamer and enthusiast though he might be, was as sane as other men, saner than most. "I hope to lead you little by little to what I have in view," Mr. Scale went on, "so that at the end of our trial month you will have learned enough to enable you to form a decision, yet not enough to use my knowledge should you choose to return to the world." It was very frank, but the secretary did not feel offended. He accepted the explanation as perfectly reasonable. In his mind, he knew full well what his choice would be. This was the supreme adventure he had been so long a-seeking. No ordinary obstacle could prevent his accepting it. So I'm just going to adjust my mic. Right, better. And now water, because I'm super thirsty. Right, there we go. Part 2. There came a pause of some length, in which Spin Robin found nothing particular to say. The lamp gurgled. The coals fell softly into the fender. Then suddenly Mr. Scale rose and stood with his back to the grate. He gazed down upon the small figure in the chair. He towered there, a kindly giant, enthusiasm burning in his eyes like lamps. His voice was very deep, his manner more solemn than before when he spoke. "So far, so good," he said. "And now, with your permission, Mr. Spin Robin, I should like to go a step further. I should like to take your note." "My note?" exclaimed the other, thinking he had not heard correctly. "Your sound, yes," repeated the clergyman. "My sound?" piped the little man, vastly puzzled, his voice shrill with excitement. He dodged about in the depths of his big leather chair, as though movement might bring explanation. Mr. Scale watched him calmly. "I want to get the vibrations of your voice, and then see what pattern they produce in the sand," he said. "Oh, in the sand, yes, quite so," replied the secretary. He remembered how the vibrations of an elastic membrane can throw dry sand loosely scattered upon its surface into various floral and geometrical figures. Chladni's figures, he seemed to remember they were called after their discoverer, but Mr. Scale's purpose, in the main, of course, escaped him. "You don't object?" "On the contrary, I am greatly interested." He stood up on the mat beside his employer. "I wish to make quite sure," the clergyman added gravely, "that your voice, your note, is what I think it is, accurately in harmony with mine and Miriam's and Mrs. Maule's. The pattern it makes will help to prove this." The secretary bowed in perplexed silence, while Mr. Scale crossed the room and took a violin from its case. The golden varnish of its ribs and back gleamed in the lamplight, and when the clergyman drew the bow across the strings to tune it, smooth, mellow sounds, soft and resonant as bells, filled the room. Evidently he knew how to handle the instrument. The notes died away in a murmur. "A Guarnerius," he explained, "and a perfect pedigree specimen. It has the most sensitive structure imaginable, and carries vibrations almost like a human nerve. For instance, while I speak," he added, laying the violin upon his companion's hand, "you will feel the vibrations of my voice run through the wood into your palm." "I do," said Spin Robin. It trembled like a living thing. "Now," continued Mr. Scale after a pause, "what I first want is to receive the vibrations of your own voice in the same way, into my very pulses. Kindly read aloud steadily while I hold it. Stop reading when I make a sign. I'll nod, so that the vibrations of my voice won't interfere." And he handed a notebook to him, with quotations entered neatly in his own handwriting, selected evidently with a purpose, and all dealing with sound, music as organized sound, and names. Spin Robin read aloud. The first quotation from Meredith he recognized, but the others, and the last one, discussing names, were new to him. "But listen in the thought, so may there come conception of a newly added chord, commanding space beyond where ear has home. Everything that the sun shines upon sings or can be made to sing, and can be heard to sing. Gases, impalpable powders, and woolen stuffs, in common with other non-conductors of sound, give forth notes in different pitches when played upon by an intermittent beam of white light. Coloured stuffs will sing in lights of different colours, but refuse to sing in others. The polarization of light being now accomplished, light and sound are known to be alike. Flames have a modulated voice and can be made to sing a definite melody. Wood, stone, metal, skins, fibres, membranes, even rapidly vibrating substance, all have in them the potentialities of musical sound. Radium receives its energy from and responds to radiations which traverse all space, as piano strings respond to sounds in unison with their notes. Space is all aquiver with waves of radiant energy. We vibrate in sympathy with a few strings here and there, with the tiny X-rays, actinic rays, light waves, heat waves, and the huge electromagnetic waves of Hertz and Marconi. But there are great spaces, numberless radiations, to which we are stone deaf. Some day, 1,000 years hence, we shall know the full sweep of this magnificent harmony. Everything in nature has its name, and he who has the power to call a thing by its proper name can make it subservient to his will, for its proper name is not the arbitrary name given to it by man, but the expression of the totality of its powers and attributes, because the powers and attributes of each being are intimately connected with its means of expression, and between both exists the most exact proportion in regard to measure, time, and condition. The meaning of the 4 quotations, as he read them, plunged down into him and touched inner chords very close to his own beliefs. Something of his own soul, therefore, passed into his voice as he read. He read, that is to say, with authority. A nod from Mr. Scale stopped him just as he was beginning a 5th passage. Raising the vibrating instrument to his ear, the clergyman first listened a moment intently. Then he quickly had it under his chin, beard flowing over it like water, and the bow singing across the strings. The note he played, he drew it out with that whipping motion of the bow only possible to a loving expert, was soft and beautiful, long drawn out with a sweet singing quality. He took it on the G-string with the 2nd finger, in the 4th position. It thrilled through him, Spin Robin declares, most curiously and delightfully. It made him happy to hear it. It was very similar to the singing vibrations he had experienced when Miriam gazed into his eyes and spoke his name. "Thank you," said Mr. Scale, and laid the violin down again. "I've got the note. You're E-flat." "E-flat?" gasped Spin Robin, not sure whether he was pleased or disappointed. "That's your sound, yes. You're E-flat, just as I thought, just as I hoped. You fit in exactly. It seems too good to be true." His voice began to boom again, as it always did when he was moved. He was striding about, very alert, very masterful, pushing the furniture out of his way, his eyes more luminous than ever. "It's magnificent." He stopped abruptly, and looked at the secretary with a gaze so enveloping that Spin Robin for an instant lost his bearings altogether. "It means, my dear Spin Robin," he said, slowly, with a touch of solemnity that woke an involuntary shiver deep in his listener's being, "that you are destined to play a part, and an important part, in one of the grandest experiments ever dreamed of by the heart of man. For the first time since my researches began 20 years ago, I now see the end in sight." "Mr. Scale, that is something, indeed," was all the little man could find to say. There was no reason he could point to why the words should have produced a sense of chill about his heart. It was only that he felt again the huge groundswell of this vast, unknown experiment surging against him, lifting him from his feet. as a man might feel the Atlantic swells rise with him towards the stars before they engulfed him forever. It seemed getting a trifle out of hand, this adventure. Yet it was what he had always longed for, and his courage must hold firm. Besides, Miriam was involved in it with him. What could he ask better than to risk his insignificant personality in some gigantic, mad attempt to plumb the unknown, with that slender, little, pale-faced beauty by his side? The wave of Mr. Scales' enthusiasm swept him away deliciously. "And now," he cried, "we'll get your pattern too. I no longer have any doubts, but nonetheless it will be a satisfaction to us both to see it. It must, I'm sure, harmonize with ours. It must." He opened a cupboard drawer and produced a thin sheet of glass, upon which he next poured some finely powdered sand out of a paper bag. It rattled, dry and faint, upon the smooth, hard surface. And while he did this, he talked rapidly, boomingly, with immense enthusiasm. "All sounds," he said, half to himself, half to the astonished secretary, "create their own patterns. Sound builds, sound destroys, and invisible sound vibrations affect concrete matter. For all sounds produce forms, the forms that correspond to them, as you shall now see. Within every form lies the silent sound that first called it into view, into visible shape, into being. Forms, shapes, bodies are the vibratory activities of sound made visible." "Goodness!" exclaimed Spin Robin, who was listening like a man in a dream, but who caught the violence of the clergyman's idea none the less. "Forms and bodies are solidified sound," cried the clergyman in italics. "You say something extraordinary," exclaimed the commonplace Spin Robin in his shrill voice. "Marvellous!" Vaguely he seemed to remember that Schelling had called architecture frozen music. Mr. Scale turned and looked at him as a god might look at an insect that he loved. "Sound, Mr. Spin Robin," he said, with a sudden and effective lowering of his booming voice, "is the original divine impulsion behind nature, communicated to language. It is creative." Then, leaving the secretary with this nut of condensed knowledge to crack as best he could, the clergyman went to the end of the room in 3 strides. He busied himself for a moment with something upon the wall. Then he suddenly turned, his great face aglow, his huge form erect, fixing his burning eyes upon his distracted companion. "In the beginning," he boomed solemnly in tones of profound conviction, "was the Word." He paused a moment, and then continued, his voice filling the room to the very ceiling. "At the word of God, at the thunder of the voice of God, worlds leapt into being." Again he paused. "Sound," he went on, the whole force of his great personality in the phrase, "was the primordial, creative energy. A sound can call a form into existence. Forms are the sound figures of archetypal forces. The Word made flesh." He stopped and moved with great soft strides about the room. Spin Robin caught the words full in the face. For a space he could not measure, considerably less than a second probably, the consciousness of something unutterably immense, unutterably flaming, rushed tumultuously through his mind, with wings that bore his imagination to a place where light was dazzling, white beyond words. He felt himself tossed up to heaven on the waves of a great sea, as the body of strange belief behind the clergyman's words poured through him. Or somewhere, behind the incoherence of the passionate language, burned the blaze of a true thought at white heat. But could he but grasp it through the stammering utterance? Then, with equal swiftness, it passed. His present surroundings came back. He dropped with a dizzy rush from awful spaces, and was aware that he was merely standing on the black woolly mat before the fire, watching the movements of his new employer, that his pumps were bright and pointed, his head just level with a dark marble mantelpiece. Dazed and a trifle breathless he felt, and at the back of his disordered mind stirred a schoolboy's memory that the Pythagoreans believed the universe to have been called out of chaos by sound, number, and harmony, or something to that effect. But these huge, fugitive thoughts that tore through him refused to be seized and dealt with. He staggered a little, mentally, then, with a prodigious effort, controlled himself, and watched. Part 3. Mr. Scale, he saw, had fastened a little sheet of glass by its four corners to silken strings hanging from the ceiling. The glass plate hung, motionless and horizontal, in the air with its freight of sand. For several minutes the clergyman played a series of beautiful modulations in double stopping upon the violin. In these the dominating influence was E-flat. Spin Robin was not only musical enough to describe it more accurately than this. Spin Robin was not musical enough to describe it more accurately than this. Only, with greater skill than he knows, he mentions how Scale drew out of that fiddle the peculiarly intimate and searching tones by which strings can reach the spiritual centre of a man and make him respond to delicate vibrations of thoughts beyond his normal gamut. Spin Robin, listening, understood that he was a greater man than he knew. And the sand on the glass sheet, he next became aware, was shifting, moving, dancing. He heard the tiny hissing and rattling of the dry grains. It was uncommonly weird. This visible and practical result made the clergyman's astonishing words seem true and convincing. That moving sand brought sanity, yet a certain curious terror of the unknown into it all. A minute later Mr. Scale stopped playing and beckoned to him. "See," he said quietly, pointing to the arrangement the particles of sand had assumed under the influence of the vibrations. "There's your pattern, your sound made visible." Excuse me 1 second. And back. Where was I? "That's your utterance, the note you substantially represent and body forth in terms of matter." The secretary stared. It was a charming but very simple pattern the lines of the sand had assumed, not unlike the fronds of a delicate fern growing out of several small circles round the base. "So that's my note, made visible," he exclaimed under his breath. "It's delightful. It's quite exquisite." "That's E-flat," returned Mr. Scale in a whisper, so as not to disturb the pattern. "If I altered the note, the pattern would alter too. E natural, for instance, would be different. Only, luckily, you are E-flat, just the note we want. And now," he continued, straightening himself up to his full height, "come over and see mine, and Miriam's and Mrs. Maule's, and you'll understand what I meant when I said that yours would harmonize." And in a glass case across the room they examined a number of square sheets of glass with sand upon them in various patterns, all rendered permanent by a thin coating of a glue-like transparent substance that held the particles in position. "There you see mine and Miriam's and Mrs. Maule's," he said, stooping to look. "They harmonize most beautifully, you observe, with your own." It was, indeed, a singular and remarkable thing. The patterns, though all different, yet combined in some subtle fashion impossible of analysis to form a complete and well-proportioned whole, a design, a picture. The patterns of the clergyman and the housekeeper provided the base and foreground. those of Miriam and the secretary the delicate superstructure. The girl's pattern, he noted with a subtle pleasure, was curiously similar to his own, but far more delicate and waving. Yet, whereas his was floral, hers was stellar in character. That of the housekeeper was spiral, and Mr. Scales he could only describe as a miniature whirlwind of very exquisite design, rising out of apparently 3 separate centres of motion. If I could paint over them the colour each shade of sound represents, Mr. Scale resumed, the tint of each timbre, or Klangfarbe, as the Germans call it, you would see better still how we are all grouped together there into a complete and harmonious whole. Spin Robin looked from the patterns to his companion's great face bending there beside him. Then he looked back again at the patterns. He could think of nothing quite intelligible to say. He noticed more clearly every minute that these dainty shapes of sand, stellar, spiral and floral, stood to one another in certain definite proportions, in a rising and calculated ratio of singular beauty. There, before you, lies a true and perfect chord made visible, the clergyman said in tones thrilling with satisfaction. 3 notes in harmony with the fundamental sound, myself, and with each other. My dear fellow, I congratulate you. I congratulate you. Thank you very much indeed, murmured Spin Robin. I don't quite understand it all yet, but it's extraordinarily fascinating and wonderful. Mr. Scale said nothing, and Spin Robin drifted back to his big armchair. A deep silence pervaded the room for the space of several minutes. In the heart of that silence lay the mass of direct and vital questions the secretary burned, yet was afraid, to ask. For such was the plain truth. He yearned to know, yet feared to hear. The discovery and the experiment of this singular man loomed already somewhat vast and terrible. The adjective that had suggested itself before returned to him. Not permissible. Of Mr. Scale himself he had no sort of fear, though a growing and uncommon respect. But of the purpose Mr. Scale had in view, he caught himself thinking more and more, yet without obvious reason, with a distinct shrinking, almost amounting to dismay. But for the fact that so sweet and gentle a creature as Miriam was travelling the same path with him, this increased sense of caution would have revealed itself plainly for what it was. Fear. I am deeply interested, Mr. Scale, he said at length, breaking first the silence. And sympathetic too, I assure you. Only, you will forgive me for saying it, I am, as yet, still rather in the dark as to where all this is to lead. The clergyman's eyes fixed straight upon his own, again made it difficult to finish the sentence as he wished. Necessarily so, because I can only lead you to my discovery step by step, replied the other steadily. I wish you to be thoroughly prepared for anything that may happen, so that you can deal intelligently with results that might otherwise overwhelm you. Overwhelm, faltered his listener. Might, I said. Note carefully my use of words, for they are accurately chosen. Before I can tell you all, I must submit you, for your own sake, to certain tests, chiefly to the test of alteration of form by sound. It is somewhat alarming, I believe, the first time. You must be thoroughly accustomed to these astonishing results before we dare to approach the final experiment, so that you will not tremble, for there can be no rehearsal. The great experiment can only be made once, and I must be as sure as possible that you will feel no terror in the face of the unknown. Part 4. Spin Robin listened breathlessly. He hesitated a moment after the other stopped speaking, then slewed round on his slippery chair and faced him. I can understand, he began, why you want imagination, but you spoke of courage too. I mean, is there any immediate cause for alarm? Any personal danger, for instance, now? for the clergyman's weighty sentences had made him realize, in a new sense, the loneliness of his situation here among these desolate hills. He would appreciate some assurance that his life was not to be trifled with before he lost the power to withdraw if he wished to do so. "None whatsoever," replied Mr. Scale with decision. "There is no question at all of physical personal injury. You must trust me and have a little patience." His tone and manner were exceedingly grave, yet at the same time inspired confidence. "I do," said Spin Robin honestly. Another pause fell between them, longer than the rest. It was broken by the clergyman. He spoke emphatically, evidently weighing his words with the utmost care. "This chord," he said simply, yet, for all the simplicity, there ran to and fro behind his words the sense of unlawful and immense forces impending. "I need for a stupendous experiment with sound, an experiment which will lead in turn towards a yet greater and final one. There is no harm in your knowing that. To produce a certain transcendent result, I want a complex sound, a chord, but a complete and perfect chord in which each note is sure of itself and absolutely accurate." He waited a moment. There was utter silence about them in the room. Spin Robin held his breath. "No instrument can help me. The notes must be human," he resumed in a lower voice, "and the utterers pure. For the human voice can produce sounds possessing in some degree the characteristics not only of all musical instruments, but of all sounds of whatever description. By means of this chord I hope to utter a certain sound, a certain name, of which you shall know more hereafter. But a name, as you surely know, need not be composed of 1 or 2 syllables only. A whole symphony may be a name, and a whole orchestra playing for days, or an entire nation chanting for years may be required to pronounce the beginning merely of certain names. Yours, Robert Spin Robin, for instance, I can pronounce in a quarter of a second, but there may be names so vast, so mighty, that minutes, days, years even may be necessary for their full utterance. There may be names, indeed, which can never be known, for they could never be uttered in time. For the moment I am content simply to drop this thought into your consciousness. Later you shall understand more. I only wish you to take in now that I need this perfect chord for the utterance in due course of a certain complex and stupendous name. The invocation, that is, of a certain complex and stupendous force." "I think I understand," whispered the other, afraid to interrupt more. "And the difficulty I have experienced in finding the 3 notes has been immense. I found Mrs. Mole, alto, and then Miriam I found at birth and trained her, soprano. And now I have found you, Mr. Spin Robin, and my chord, with myself as a bass, is complete. Your note and Miriam's, soprano and tenor, are closer than the relations between the other notes, and a tenor has accordingly been most difficult to find. You can now understand the importance of your being sympathetic to each other." Spin Robin's heart burned within him as he listened. He began to grasp some sweet mystical meaning in the sense of perfect companionship the mere presence of the girl inspired. They were the upper notes in the same chord together, linked in a singing and harmonious relation, the one necessary to the other. Moreover, in the presence of Mr. Scale and the housekeeper, bass and alto in the full chord, their completeness was still more emphasized, and they knew their fullest life. The adventure promised to be amazingly seductive. He would learn practically the strange truth that to know the highest life, self must be lost and merged in something bigger. And was this not precisely what he had been so long seeking? Escape from his own insignificance. "And, the Hebrew that you required of me, Mr. Scale?" he asked, returning to practical considerations. "Our purposes require a certain knowledge of Hebrew," he answered without hesitation or demur. Because that ancient language and the magical resources of sound are profoundly linked. In the actual sounds of many of the Hebrew letters lies a singular power, unguessed by the majority, undivined, especially, of course, by the mere scholar, but available for the pure in heart who may discover how to use their extraordinary values. They constitute, in my view at least, a remnant of the original Chaldean mysteries, the lore of that magic which is older than religion. Chaldean. I don't know that word. The secret of this knowledge lies in the psychic values of sound. For Hebrew, the Hebrew of the Bahir remains in the hierarchy of languages a direct channel to the unknown and inscrutable forces, and the knowledge of mighty and supersensual things lies locked up in the correct utterance of many of its words, letters, and phrases. Its correct utterance, mark well, for knowledge of the most amazing and terrible kind is there, waiting release by him who knows, and who greatly dares. And you shall learn that sound is power. The Hebrew alphabet you must know intimately, and the intricate association of its letters with number, colour, harmony and geometrical form, all of which are but symbols of the realities at the very roots of life. The Hebrew alphabet, Mr. Spinrobin, is a discourse in methods of manifestation, of formation. In its correct pronunciation lies a way to direct knowledge of divine powers, and to conditions beyond this physical existence. The clergyman's voice grew louder and lower as he proceeded, and the conviction was unavoidable that he referred to swings whereof he had practical... Wow. I'm just going to take that sentence again. Sorry, I got distracted by someone in chat who may not have shown up because they were a bot. The clergyman's voice grew louder and... Louder? Oh my goodness. Louder is the word I was aiming for. Okay. Don't worry, we're nearly at a break. Third time. Don't use those last takes. The clergyman's voice grew lower and lower as he proceeded, and the conviction was unavoidable that he referred to things whereof he had practical knowledge. To Spinrobin it was like the lifting of a great veil. As a boy he had divined something of these values of sound and name, but with the years his knowledge had come to seem fantastic and unreal. It now returned upon him with the force of a terrific certainty. That immense, old, inner playground of his youth, without boundaries or horizon, rolled up before his mental vision, inviting further and detailed discovery. With the language, Quay language, he continued, you need not trouble, but the names of so many things you must know accurately, and especially the names of the so-called angels, for these are in reality forces of immense potency, vast spiritual powers, qualities and the like, all evocable by correct utterance of their names. This language, as you will see, is alive and divine in the true sense. Its letters are the vehicles of activities, its words terrific formulae, and the true pronunciation of them remains today a direct channel to divine knowledge. In time you shall see. In time you shall know. In time you shall hear, Mr. Spinrobin. And he thrust his great head forwards and dropped his voice to a hushed whisper. In time we shall altogether make this experiment in sound, which shall redeem us and make us as gods. Thank you, gasped the secretary, swept off his feet by this torrent of uncommon mystical language, and passing a moist hand through his feathery hair. He was not entirely ignorant, of course, of the alleged use of sound in the various systems of so-called magic that have influenced the minds of imaginative men during the history of the world. He had heard, more or less vaguely, perhaps, but still with understanding, about words of power. But hitherto he had merely regarded such things as picturesque superstitions, or half-truths that lie midway between science and imagination. Here, however, was a man in the 20th century, the days of radium, flying machines, wireless telegraphy, and other invitations towards materialism, who apparently had practical belief in the effective use of sound and in its psychic and divine possibilities, and who was devoting all of his not inconsiderable powers of heart and mind to their actual demonstration. It was astonishing. It was delightful. It was incredible. And, but for the currents of a strange and formidable fear that this conception of Scales' audacious experiment set stirring in his soul, Spin Robin's enthusiasm would have been possibly as great as his own. As it was, he went up to the big clergyman and held out his hand, utterly carried away by the strangeness of it all, caught up in a vague splendour he did not quite understand, prepared to abandon himself utterly. "I gather something of what you mean," he said earnestly, "if not all, and I hope most sincerely I may prove suitable for your purpose when the time comes. As a boy, you know, curiously enough, I always believed in the efficacy of names and the importance of naming true. I think," he added somewhat diffidently, looking up straight into the luminous eyes above him, "if you will allow me to say so, I would follow you anywhere, Mr. Scale. Anywhere you cared to lead." "Upon him that overcometh," said the clergyman in a gentle voice he sometimes used, as soft as the voice of a woman, "I will write my new name." He gazed down very searchingly into the other's eyes for a minute or two, then shook the proffered hand without another word, and so they separated and went to bed, for it was long past midnight. That's where we reach the end of the chapter and where we're going to take a break. Yeah. So there we go. That's the first half of the stream for tonight. I don't think was there anything. Why did I turn a corner on one of these pages? I do this while I'm reading, but that would be a cool thing to come back to and revisit when I'm not reading, and then I have to go back and actually reread the page to try and figure out why I was thinking, oh yeah, this would be a thing to discuss. No, I'm going to read that in a break and see if I can figure it out. Time for more tea? Excellent. Yes, I'm going to probably go and refill my water bottle. Right, yep, you know what to do. It's break time. Break for me is break for you. So, get up, stretch. I'm going to follow these instructions myself. Don't worry, I will move. Move around, cycle those fluids. Stroke a cat if you've got one. And I'll see you back here in about 5 minutes, friends. Bye for now. welcome back. How are we doing? Even though it's the same link, I'm going to unpin that one. I'm going to put this one because, good news, we've advanced to the next chapter. So if anyone comes in and wants to click, I'm like, where are we? It's chapter 3. Because, you know, has to be helpful. Let you finish making fire before continuing? Sure thing. I can... Don't worry, I can vamp. Or something. Yeah, so what... Why did I mark this bit? It's about... No instrument can help me, the notes must be human, he resumed in a lower voice, and the utterers pure, for the human voice can produce sounds possessing in some degree the characteristics not only of all musical instruments, but of all sounds of whatever description. Oh, yeah, he's talking about beatboxers. There we go. That's the joke I wanted to make. Is, you know, like, the human voice can it not just make any human sound, but can make the sound of any kind of instrument or other machine or device that you can care to imagine. Oh, beatboxers. Oh, the guy from Police Academy who's what? Michael Winslow. That's who he's talking about. It's definitely science. I mean, it checks out. You know, you give someone a microphone and a loop station. There's all manner of wonders they can construct. It's remarkable. That's all Scale's doing here. It's just an experiment into beatboxing. Also, yeah, I saw you pop up, Andy, with "Hey chat, know what E flat is also known as? D sharp." Yes, I don't. Why? Do I now need to go back and see where they were saying that in the book? That I can see. Is that like pointing out an inconsistency, or where? Hang on. Fire done. Nice. Good one. That sounds nice, actually. I do. He just popped in for a minute. He was going on about E flat. Okay. Is that right? That's the thing. I wasn't sure if like, is this a mistake that Blackwood's just made, and that like. Oh, of course, so long as John's D sharp reference. Right, yeah, of course, that. See, I mean, as I feel Lucy politely puts it, I'm musical but not a musician. Just as one can have soul but not be a soldier, or ham but not be a hamster. And so, therefore, I'm adjacent to all the complaints that you're mixing channels here. No, don't worry, it's all kind of under the same weird umbrella. I'm familiar with all the complaints about the longest John's doing every song in D sharp or whatever. Believe me, I hear a lot about it from Lucy when she's doing the songbooks. But also people showing up on the Discord to complain, like, why did the person who did these songbooks arrange them in this fashion? And she's like, yo, that's just how the song's written. Don't shoot the messenger. So but as someone who doesn't actually do the music, you put a songbook in front of me, I can't read that thing. So it's the actual complaints, the weight of those complaints, it means nothing to me. I don't get it. So yeah. Right. We should probably crack on because, oh good grief, this is a long old chapter. I think. Oh, starting on page 69. Nice. And we have. No, it's not too bad. It's 15 pages. Okay, we're good. We're good. Don't worry, chat. It might start getting a little bit weird after this, though, because I think the chapter lengths start... Maybe start getting a little strange? I don't know. I'm getting a feel for how long this is. And we'll be halfway through the book at the end of this. Right. Was there anything else I needed to do or say? No, I don't think so. Joey is very cosily curled up in his cube. How alliterative of me. I'm good. I've got water. I'm going to drink a lot more of this because that tea dried me out. Yeah, we had our first bot in chat for a long time, I think. Seems like it's... I don't feel like I've seen one for a while, certainly here. And I'm assuming no one else in chat saw it because it was flagged up as, hey, we think this might be a bot. So... the complaints about D sharp are because it's not a real scale? I don't think that's true. Good night, Llama. And also hello to Sherlock Holmes. And to Jason Isaacs. But yeah, good night. Sleep well. Thank you for being here. Oh, you saw the deleted comment? Not what it was? Oh, okay. So that's... So they were briefly hiding bot chats, and now they're just letting them back through. That's a shame. You have a setting to show deleted messages so you can see it? Oh, is that like a plugin or something? Like a pt.2 thing? That seems cheeky. Not being silly, it's a theoretical scale? Oh, no. Andy, no, we're getting into the weeds. I don't... You're trying to explain particle physics to a cat now is what you're doing. But trying to explain musical theory and why D sharp is only a theoretical scale and not a real one. No. You can put me in a lab coat, but you're not going to make me understand. Right. I'm going to carry on. We've got a story to get through. Anyway. I'm also going to adjust my light because it's shining in the wrong direction. Right. TLDR, it's a silly key. Oh, I know that. I know that much. That's because everyone just keeps saying it. Also, yeah, my voice feels a little bit raspy this evening because some of you may or may not be aware I have a cat, and at the moment his fur doesn't know whether to... Well, it wants to molt, but also there's so much of it, and so it's just everywhere. And... yeah... You know, not to vote for like a very minor version of the lepers eating face party, but I also have cat allergies as well as having a cat. So this is a problem of my own design. But it does mean I partially subsist on a buffet of cat fur at the moment, and it's ruining my sinuses. So, you know, I'm doing what I can to fight that back, but it makes life a challenge sometimes. And by life, I mean breathing. So, yeah, I'm working on that. But that is currently where things are at, so I've got a little bit of a rasp. Okay, fine, we're good. Shall we continue? We Joey fans appreciate the sacrifice. Well, I'm glad. You know, if nothing else, we have a good set of emotes out of it. Which, I think that counts for a lot, actually. Otherwise, you know, you'd have like 2 emotes on this channel. Should we continue? We are up to Chapter 3 of the Human Chord. Still by Algernon Blackwood. In his bedroom, though excitement... 4 words in and I've biffed it already. Okay, let's... we won't use that take. Scrap that one. We'll go back. We'll start again. And that's a good assortment of spinning Joeys in chat. I approve. Let's try again. This is The Human Chord by Algernon Blackwood, Chapter 3. In his bedroom, though excitement banished sleep in spite of the lateness of the hour, he was too exhausted to make any effective attempt to reduce the confusion in his mind to order. For the first time in his life, the diary page for the day remained blank. For a long time he sat before it with his pencil, then sighed and put it away. A volume he might have written, but not a page, much less a line or 2, and though it was but 8 hours since he had made the acquaintance of the Reverend Philip Scale, it seemed to him more like 8 days. Moreover, all that he had heard and seen, fantastic and strained as he felt it to be, possibly even the product of religious mania, was nevertheless profoundly disquieting, for mixed up with it somewhere or other was truth. Mr. Scale had made a discovery, a giant one. It was not all merely talk and hypnotism, the glamour of words. His great experiment would prove to be real and terrible. He had discovered certain uses of sound, occult yet scientific, and if he, Spin Robin, elected to stay on, he would be obliged to play his part in the denouement. And this thought from the very beginning appalled while it fascinated him. It filled him with a kind of horrible amazement. For the object the clergyman sought, though not yet disclosed, already cast its monstrous shadow across his path. He somehow discerned that it would deal directly with knowledge the saner judgment of a commonplace world had always deemed undesirable, unlawful, unsafe, dangerous to the souls that dared attempt it, failure involving a pitiless and terrible nemesis. He lay in bed, watching the play of the firelight upon the high ceiling, and thinking, in confused fashion, of the huge clergyman with his thundering voice, his great lambent eyes and his seductive gentleness, of his singular speculations, and his hints, half menacing, half splendid, of things to come. Then he thought of the housekeeper with her deafness and her withered arm, and that white piece about her face, and, lastly, of Miriam, soft, pale beneath her dark skin, her gem-like eyes ever finding his own, and of the intimate personal relation so swiftly established between them. It was, indeed, a singular household thus buried away in the heart of these lonely mountains. The stately old mansion was just the right setting for... Unbidden into his mind, a queer new thought shot suddenly, interrupting the flow of ideas. He never understood how or whence it came, but with the picture of all the empty rooms in the corridor about him, he received the sharp, unwelcome impression that when Mr. Scale described the house as empty, it was really nothing of the sort. Utterly unannounced, the easy conviction took possession of him that the building was actually populated. It was an extraordinary idea to have. There was absolutely nothing in the way of evidence to support it, and with it flashed across his memory echoes of that unusual catechism he had been subjected to, in particular the questions whether he believed in spirits, other life, as Scale termed it. Sinister suspicions flashed through his imagination as he lay there, listening to the ashes dropping in the grate, and watching the shadows cloak the room. Was it possible that there were occupants of these rooms that the man had somehow evoked from the interstellar spaces, and crystallized by means of sound into form and shape? Created? Something freezing swept into him from a region far beyond the world. He shivered. These cold terrors that grip the soul suddenly without apparent cause, whence do they come? Why? Out of these rather extravagant and baseless speculations should have emerged this sense of throttling dread that appalled him. And why, once again, should he have felt convinced that the ultimate nature of the clergyman's great experiment was impious, wrought with a kind of heavenly danger, unpermissible? Spin Robin, lying there shivering in his big bed, could not guess. He only knew that by way of relief his mind instinctively sought out Miriam, and so found peace. Curled up in a ball between the sheets, his body presently slept, while his mind, intensely active, travelled off into that vast inner prairie of his childhood days, and called her name aloud. And presumably she came to him at once, for his sleep was undisturbed, and his dreams uncommonly sweet, and he woke thoroughly refreshed 8 hours later, to find Mrs. Maule standing beside his bed, with thin bread and butter and a cup of steaming tea. Part 2. For the rest, the new secretary fell quickly and easily into the routine of this odd little household, for he had great powers of adaptability. At first, the promise of excitement faded. The mornings were spent in the study of Hebrew, Mr. Scale taking great pains to instruct him in the vibratory pronunciation, or so he termed it, of certain words, and especially of the divine or angelic names. The correct utterance, involving a kind of prolonged and sonorous vibration of the vowels, appeared to be of supreme importance. He further taught him curious correspondences between sound and number, and the attribution to these again of certain colours. The vibration of sound and light, as air and ether, had intrinsic importance, it seemed, in the uttering of certain names, all of which, however, Spin Robin learnt by rote, making neither head nor tail of it. That there were definite results, though, he could not deny. Psychic results. For a name uttered correctly produced one effect, and uttered wrongly produced another, just as a wrong note in a chord afflicts the hearer, whereas the right one blesses. The afternoons, wet or fine, they went for long walks together about the desolate hills, Miriam sometimes accompanying them. Their talk and laughter echoed all over the mountains, but there was no one to hear them, the nearest village being several miles away, and the railway station nothing but a railway station. The isolation was severe. There were no callers, but the bi-weekly provision carts. Letters had to be fetched, and newspapers were neglected. Arrayed in fluffy tweeds, with baggy knickerbockers and heavily nailed boots, he trotted beside his giant companion over the moors, somewhat like a child who expected its hand to be taken over difficult places. His confidence had been completely won. The sense of shyness left him. He felt that he already stood to the visionary clergyman in a relationship that was more than secretarial. He still panted, but with enthusiasm instead of with regret. In the background loomed always the dim sense of the discovery and experiment approaching inevitably, just as in childhood the idea of heaven and hell had stood waiting to catch him, real only when he thought carefully about them. Scale was just the kind of man, he felt, who would make a discovery, so simple that the rest of the world had overlooked it, so tremendous that it struck at the roots of human knowledge. He had the simple originality of genius, and a good deal of its inspirational quality as well. Before 10 days had passed, he was following him about like a dog, hanging upon his lightest word. New currents ran through him, mentally and spiritually, as the fires of Mr. Scale's vivid personality quickened his own, and the impetus of his inner life lifted him with its more violent momentum. The world of an ordinary man is so circumscribed, so conventionally moulded, that he can scarcely conceive of things that may dwell normally in the mind of an extraordinary man. Adumbrations of these, however, may throw their shadow across his field of vision. Spin Robin was ordinary in most ways, while Mr. Scale was unordinary in nearly all, and thus, living together in this intimate solitude, the secretary got peeps into his companion's region that gradually convinced him. With cleaned nerves and vision, he began to think in ways and terms that were new to him. Scale, like some big figure in story or legend, moved forward into his life and waved a wand. His own smaller personality began to expand. Thoughts entered unannounced that hitherto had not even knocked at the door, and the frontiers of his mind first wavered, then unfolded to admit them. The clergyman's world, whether he himself were mad or sane, was a real world, alive, vibrating, shortly to produce practical results. Spin Robin would have staked his very life upon it. And meanwhile, he made love openly, under any other conditions, outrageously to Miriam, whose figure of soft beauty moving silently about the house helped to redeem it. She rendered him quiet little services of her own accord that pleased him immensely, for occasionally he detected her delicate perfume about his room, and he was sure it was not Mrs. Maule who put the fresh heather in the glass jars upon the table, or arranged his papers with such neat precision on the desk. Her delicate, shining little face with its wreath of dark hair went with him everywhere, hauntingly, possessingly, and when he kissed her, as he did now every morning and every evening under Mr. Scales' very eyes, it was like plunging his lips into a bed of wildflowers that no artificial process had ever touched. Something in him sang when she was near. She had, too, what he used to call as a boy night eyes, changing after dusk into such shadowy depths that to look at them was to look beyond and through them. The sight could never rest only upon their surface. Through her eyes, then, stretched all the delight of that old immense playground, where names clothed, described, and summoned living realities. His attitude towards her was odd yet comprehensible. Although his desire was unquestionably great, it was not particularly active, probably because he knew that he held her and that no aggressive effort was necessary. Secure in the feeling that she belonged to him and he to her, he also found that he had little enough to say to her, never anything to ask. She knew and understood it all beforehand. Expression was uncalled for. As well might the brimming kettle sing to the water, "I contain you," or the water reply, "I fill you." Only this was not the simile he used. In his own thoughts from the very beginning he had used the analogy of sound, of the chord. As well might one note feel called upon to cry to another in the same chord, "Hark, I'm sounding with you," as that Spin Robin should say to Miriam, "My heart responds and sings to yours." After a period of separation, however, he became charged with things he wanted to say to her, all of which vanished utterly the moment they came together. Words instantly then became unnecessary, foolish. He heard that faint internal singing and his own resonant response, and they merely stayed there side by side, completely happy, everything told without speech. This sense of blissful union enwrapped his soul. In the language of his boyhood he had found her name. He knew her. She was his. Yet sometimes they did talk, and their conversations, in any other setting, but this amazing one provided by the wizardry of Scales' enthusiasm, must have seemed exquisitely ludicrous. In the room, often with the clergyman a few feet away, reading by the fire, they would sit in the window niche, gazing into one another's eyes, perhaps even holding hands. Then, after a long interval of silence, Mr. Scale would hear Spin Robin's thin accents. "You brilliant little sound! I hear you everywhere within me, chanting a song of life." And Miriam's reply, thrilled and gentle, "I'm but your perfect echo. My whole life sings with yours." Whereupon, kissing softly, they would separate, and Mr. Scale would cover them mentally with his blessing. Sometimes, too, he would send for the housekeeper and, with the aid of the violin, would lead the four voices, his own bass included, through the changes of various chords for the vibratory utterance of certain names, and the beauty of these sounds, singing the divine names, would make the secretary swell to twice his normal value and importance, thus he puts it, as the forces awakened by the music poured and surged into the atmosphere about them. Whereupon the clergyman would explain with burning words that many a symphony of Beethoven's, a sonata of Schumann's, or a suite of Tchaikovsky's were the names, peaceful, romantic, or melancholy, of great spiritual potencies, heard partially by these masters in their moments of inspirational ecstasy. The powers of these beings were just as characteristic, their existence just as real as the simpler names of the Hebrew angels, and their psychic influence upon the soul that heard them uttered just as sure and individual. For the power of music, my dear Spin Robin, has never yet by science or philosophy been adequately explained, and never can be until the occult nature of sound, and its correlations with colour, form, and number, is once again understood. Rhythm is the first law of the physical creation, says one, and music is a breaking into sound of the fundamental rhythm of universal being. Rhythm and harmony, declares Plato, find their way into the secret places of the soul. It is manifestation, whispers the deaf Beethoven, of the inner essential nature of all that is, or in the hint of Leibniz, it is a calculation which the soul makes unconsciously in secret. It is love in search of a name, sang George Eliot, nearer in her intuition to the truth than all the philosophers, since love is the dynamic of pure spirit. But I, he continued, after a pause for breath, and smiling amid the glow of his great enthusiasm, go beyond and behind them all into the very heart of the secret. For you shall learn that to know the sounds of the great names and to utter their music correctly shall merge yourself into the heart of their deific natures and make you as the gods themselves. And Spin Robin, as he listened, noticed that a slight trembling ran across the fabric of his normal world, as though it were about to vanish and give place to another. A new world of divine things made utterly simple. For many things that Scales said in this easy, natural way, he felt, were in the nature of clues and passwords, whose effects he carefully noted upon his secretary, being intended to urge him, with a certain violence even, into the desired region. Scale was testing him all the time. Part 3. And it was about this time, more than halfway through the trial month, that the clergyman took Spin Robin, now become far more than merely secretary, into his fuller confidence. In a series of singular conversations, which the bewildered little fellow has reported to the best of his ability, he explained to him something of the science of true names, and to prove it, he made 2 singular experiments. First, he uttered the true name of Mrs. Maule. Secondly, of Spin Robin himself, with results that shall presently be told. These things it was necessary for him to know and understand before they made the great experiment. Otherwise, if unprepared, he might witness results that would involve the loss of self-control and the failure, therefore, of the experiment. A disaster too formidable to contemplate. By way of leading up to this, however, he gave some account first of the original discovery. Spin Robin asked few questions, made few comments. He took notes, however, of all he heard, and at night wrote them up as best he could in his diary. At times the clergyman rose and interrupted the strange recital by moving about the room with his soft and giant stride, talking even while his back was turned. And at times the astonished secretary wrote so furiously that he broke his pencil with a snap, and Mr. Scale had to wait while he sharpened it again. His inner excitement was so great that he almost felt he emitted sparks. The clue, it appears, came to the clergyman by mere chance, though he admits his belief that the habits of asceticism and meditation he had practised for many years may have made him in some way receptive to the vision, or as a vision it seems the thing first presented itself. A vision made possible by a moment of very rapid hypnosis. An Anglican priest at the time, in charge of a small Norfolk parish, he was a great believer in the value of ceremonial, in the use, that is, of colour, odour, and sound to induce mental states of worship and adoration, more especially, however, as sound is uttered by the voice, the human voice being unique among instruments in that it combined the characteristics of all other sounds. Intoning, therefore, was to him a matter of psychic importance, and it was one summer evening, intoning in the chancel, that he noticed suddenly certain very curious results. The faces of two individuals in the congregation underwent a charming and singular change, a change which he would not describe more particularly at the moment, since Spin Robin should presently witness it for himself. It all happened in a flash, in less than a second, and it is probable, he holds, that his own voice induced an instant of swift and passing hypnosis upon himself. For, as he stood there at the lectern, there came upon him a moment of keen interior lucidity, in which he realized beyond doubt or question what had happened. The use of voice, bell, or gong has long been known as a means of inducing the hypnotic state, and during this almost instantaneous trance of his, there came a sudden revelation of the magical possibilities of sound vibration. By some chance rhythm of his intoning voice, he had hit upon the exact pitch, quality, and accent which constituted the note of more than one member of the congregation before him. Those particular individuals, without being aware of the fact, had at once responded automatically and inevitably. For a second he had heard, he knew their true names. He had unwittingly called them. Spin Robin's heart leapt with excitement as he listened, for this idea of naming true carried him back to the haunted days of his childhood clairvoyance, when he had known Winky. "I don't quite understand, Mr. Scale," he put in, desirous to hear more detailed explanation. "But presently you shall," was all the clergyman vouchsafed. The clue thus provided by chance he had followed up, but by methods hard to describe, apparently. A corner of the veil, momentarily lifted, had betrayed the value that lies in the repetition of certain sounds, the rhythmic reiteration of syllables, in a word, of chanting or incantation. By diving down into his subconscious region, already prepared by long spiritual training, he gradually succeeded in drawing out further details piece by piece, and finally, by infinite practice and prayer, welding them together into an intelligible system. The science of true naming, slowly, with the efforts of years, revealed itself. His mind slipped past the deceit of mere sensible appearances. Clairaudiently, he heard the true inner names of things and persons. Mr. Scale rose from his chair. With thumbs in the armholes of his waistcoat and fingers drumming loudly on his breast, he stood over the secretary, who continued making frantic notes. "That chance discovery, then, made during a moment's inner vision," he continued with a grave excitement, "gave me the key to a whole world of new knowledge, and since then I have made incredible developments. Listen closely, Mr. Spin Robin, while I explain, and take in what you can." The secretary laid down his pencil and notebook. He sat forward, in an attitude of intense eagerness upon the edge of his chair. He was trembling. This strange modern confirmation of his early heaven of wonder before the senses had thickened and concealed it, laid bare again his earliest world of far-off pristine glory. The ordinary name of a person, understand then, is merely a sound attached to their physical appearance at birth by the parents, a meaningless sound. It is not their true name. That, however, exists behind it in the spiritual world, and is the accurate description of the soul. It is the sound you express visibly before me. The word is the life. Spin Robin surreptitiously picked up his pencil, but the clergyman spied the movement. "Never mind the notes," he said. "Listen closely to me." Spin Robin obeyed, meekly. "Your ordinary outer name, however," continued Mr. Scale, speaking with profound conviction, may be made a conductor to your true inner one. The connection between the two by a series of subtle interior links forms gradually with the years. For even the ordinary name, if you reflect a moment, becomes in time a sound of singular authority, inwoven with the finest threads of your physical being, so that in a sense you become it. To hear it suddenly called aloud in the night, in a room full of people, in the streets, unexpectedly, is to know a shock, however small, of increased vitality. It touches the imagination. It calls upon the soul built up around it. He paused a moment. His voice boomed musically about the room, even after he ceased speaking. Bewildered, wondering, delighted, Spin Robin drank in every word. How well he knew it all. "Now," resumed the clergyman, lowering his tone unconsciously, "the first part of my discovery lies in this, that I have learned to pronounce the ordinary names of things and people in such a way as to lead me to their true inner ones." "But," interrupted Spin Robin irrepressibly, "how in the name of—" "Hush!" cried Scale quickly. "Never again call upon a mighty name in vain. It is dangerous. Concentrate your mind upon what I now tell you, and you shall understand a part, at least, of my discovery. As I was saying, I have learned how to find the true name by means of the false, and understand, if you can, that to pronounce a true name correctly means to participate in its very life, to vibrate with its essential nature, to learn the ultimate secret of its inmost being. For our true names are the sounds originally uttered by the Word of God when He created us, or called us into being out of the void of infinite silence, and to repeat them correctly means, literally, to speak with His voice. It is to speak the truth." The clergyman dropped his tone to an awed whisper. "Words are the veils of being. To speak them truly is to lift a corner of the veil." "What a glory! What a thing!" exclaimed the other under his breath, trying to keep his mind steady, but losing control of language in the attempt. The great sentences seemed to change the little room into a temple where sacred things were about to reveal themselves. Spin Robin now understood in a measure why Mr. Scale's utterance of his own name and that of Miriam had sounded grand. Behind each he had touched the true name and made it echo. The clergyman's voice brought his thoughts back from distances in that inner prairie of his youth where they had lost themselves. "For all of us," he was repeating with rapt expression in his shining eyes, "are sounds in the mighty music the universe sings to God, whose voice it was that first produced us, and whose awful resonance we are echoes therefore in harmony or disharmony, and of whose awful resonance we are echoes therefore in harmony or disharmony." A look of power passed into his great visage. Spin Robin's imagination, in spite of the efforts that he made, fluttered with broken wings behind the swift words. A flash of the former terror stirred in the depths of him. The man was at the heels of knowledge it is not safe for humanity to seek. "Yes," he continued, directing his gaze again upon the other, "that is a part of my discovery, though only a part, mind. By repeating your outer name in a certain way until it disappears in the mind, I can arrive at the real name within. And to utter it is to call upon the secret soul, to summon it from its lair. I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by name. You remember the texts? I know thee by name, said Jehovah to the great Hebrew magician, and thou art mine. By certain rhythms and vibratory modulations of the voice, it is possible to produce harmonics of sound which awaken the inner name into life, and then to spell it out. Note well, to spell it. Spell, incantation, the magical use of sound, the meaning of the word of power used with such terrific effect in the old, forgotten Hebrew magic. Utter correctly the names of their forces, or angels. I am teaching you daily now, he went on reverently with glowing eyes and intense conviction. Pronounce them with full vibratory power that awakens all their harmonics, and you awaken also their counterpart in yourself. You summon their strength or characteristic quality to your aid. You introduce their powers actively into your own psychical being. Had Jacob succeeded in discovering the name of that angel with whom he wrestled, he would have become one with its superior power and have thus conquered it. Only he asked instead of commanded, and he found it not. Magnificent! Splendid! Cried Spin Robin, starting from his chair, seizing with his imagination potently stirred this possibility of developing character and rousing the forces of the soul. We shall yet call upon the names and see, replied Scale, placing a great hand upon his companion's shoulder. Not aloud, necessarily, but by an inner effort of intense will which sets in vibration the finer harmonics heard only by the poet and magician, those harmonics and overtones which embody the physical element in music. For the methods of poet and magician, I tell you, my dear Spin Robin, are identical, and all the faiths of the world are at the heels of that thought. Provided you have faith, you can move mountains. You can call upon the very gods. A most wonderful idea, Mr. Scale, faltered the other breathlessly. Quite wonderful. The huge sentences deafened him a little with their mental thunder. And utterly simple, was the reply. For all truth is simple. He paced the floor like a great caged animal. He went down and leaned against the dark bookcase, with his legs wide apart and hands in his coat pockets. To name truly, you see, is to evoke, to create. He roared from the end of the room. To utter, as it should be uttered, any one of the 10 words or creative powers of the deity in the old Hebrew system is to become master of the world to which it corresponds. For these names are still in living contact with the realities behind. It means to vibrate with the powers that called the universe into being and into form. A sort of shadowy majesty draped his huge figure, Spin Robin thought, as he stood in semi-darkness at the end of the room and thundered forth these extraordinary sentences with a conviction that, for the moment at least, swept away all doubt in the mind of his listener. Dreadful ideas, huge-footed and threatening, rushed to and fro in the secretary's mind. He was torn away from all anchorage, staggered, dizzy and dismayed, yet at the same time, owing to his adventure-loving temperament, a prey to some secret and delightful exaltation of the spirit. He was out of his depth, in great waters. And think, for a moment, how beautiful the huge words by which God called into being the worlds and sent the perfect, rounded bodies of the spheres spinning and singing, blazing their eternal trails of glory through the void. How sweet the whisper that crystallized in flowers! How tender the note that fashioned the eyes and face, say, of Miriam! At the name of Miriam he felt caught up and glorified, in some delightful and inexplicable way that brought with it peace. The power of all these strange and glowing thoughts poured their full tide into his own rather arid and thirsty world, frightening him with their terrific force. But the mere utterance of that delightful name, in the way Scale uttered it, brought confidence and peace. Could we but hear them, Scale continued half to himself, half to his probationer, for the sad thing is that today the world has ears yet cannot hear. As light is distorted by passing through a gross atmosphere, so sound reaches us but indistinctly now, and few true names can bring their wondrous messages of power correctly. Men, coarsening with the materialism of the ages, have grown thick and gross with the luxury of inventions and the diseases of modern life that develop intellects at the expense of soul. They have lost the old inner hearing of divine sound, and but one here and there can still catch the faint, far-off and ineffable music. He lifted his eyes, and his voice became low and even gentle as the glowing words fell from his heart of longing. None hear now the morning stars when they sing together to the sun. None know the chanting of the spheres. The ears of the world are stopped with lust, and the old divine science of true naming seemed lost forever amid the crash of engines and the noisy thunder of machinery. Only among flowers and certain gems are the accurate old true names still to be found. But we are on the track, my dear Spin Robin. We are on the ancient trail to power. The clergyman closed his eyes and clasped his hands, lifting his face upwards with a rapt expression, while he murmured under his breath the description of the rider on the white horse from the Book of Revelations, as though it held some inner meaning that his heart knew yet dared not divulge. And he had a name written, that no man knew but he himself, and he was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood, and this name is called the Word of God, and he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And for an instant Spin Robin, listening to the rolling sound but not to the actual words, fancied that a faintly coloured atmosphere of deep scarlet accompanied the vibrations of his resonant whisper, and produced in the depths of his mind this momentary effect of coloured audition. It was all very strange and puzzling. He tried, however, to keep an open mind and struggle as best he might with these big swells that rolled into his little pool of life and threatened to merge it in a vaster tide that he had yet dreamed of. Knowing how limited is the world which the senses report, he saw nothing too inconceivable in the idea that certain persons might possess a peculiar inner structure of the spirit by which supersensuous things can be perceived. And what more likely than that a man of Mr. Scales' unusual calibre should belong to them? Indeed, that the clergyman possessed certain practical powers of an extraordinary description, he was as certain as that the house was not empty, as he had first supposed. Of neither had he proof as yet, but proof was not long in forthcoming. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 3, and where I shall finish for tonight. Thank you for listening. Yeah, his name's Kevin. It's actually very easy to pronounce. You don't really need to put a lot of effort into it. I don't know the Hebrew derivations of Kevin, but it probably doesn't exist. Hello. Welcome to Dave Raiders. Dave, yourself. The human nerd? Damn, I can't believe he just come in blasting like that. How dare. Thanks for reading. It's very interesting. I hope so. I'm, yeah. There's some different stuff for Blackwood. Well, certainly for what I have read elsewhere of Blackwood in this one. Not least the romantic relationship between Spin Robin and Miriam feels like, frankly, I think the first time I've read anything like that on this channel, because so much of the stuff that certainly that I've read here is all just, it's very chaste. It's very just, I mean, frankly, even having a character in the story that's not a man is a rarity. And I'm thinking that probably the closest you get to that is Dracula, where you have Mina, who was like, oh yeah, also, Mina was here, and everyone felt sorry for her after she got bitten by Dracula, and it took them long enough to figure it out, because mostly it's like, oh, this woman seems a little bit off colour today. I don't know what's up with her. She took far longer to make the breakfast than usual. Something must be strange. Anyway, on with our lives. And eventually, when they do figure out she's been bitten by Dracula, it's mostly just, oh, good grief, man. Don't worry. The men will handle it. You just go and make us breakfast and tidy the house and clean up and organise everything and check on the cooks and the maids and the gardeners and that. And we men will do the busy work over here. And like Jonathan Harker, Ultimate Wife Guy, does kind of insist that he loves her and whatnot, but there's not a lot of like actual like displayed affection between characters, and so I feel like that's the closest, certainly anything that I've read on it. I mean, I don't have a clear memory of every story that I've read, but yeah, it's mostly a lot of guys being guys and women as tertiary characters if they even get a look in, and so yeah, it's kind of interesting to actually have someone who's, I don't know, just writing more emotively about this kind of thing and romantically about it. Oh, you're right, Joey. You got some sneezels. Okay. You're gonna have to go back and listen to the beginning of this one. I mean, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think it's good. I'm actually fast catching up to where I've got to in my reading ahead. So I need to. Joey's allergic to romance. Yeah, feelings. Bleh. You going? Okay. Yeah, you've had enough. He's off. And yeah, like I'm interested as well to see where it. Obviously, I'm interested to see where it goes, but I kind of. This isn't a fully formed thought, so I'm probably going to be handling it quite clumsily. But in terms of the religious aspects of this, where obviously it's very clearly introducing, the Christian religion and God, capital G God, creating the world with his voice and using this same like words of power system to create Earth and man and the universe and stuff, and angels kind of being more like energy forces rather than, oh, this is Gabriel, and this is Peter, and this is Jim, and these are, but they're more like the names of angels are like these creative and powerful forces by which these things happen. And again, sort of taking almost like to me, like a kind of cosmic horror angle on this, in that it's sort of going within like the universe of the story. Like, yeah, that stuff's real and that's cool because of course we all believe in it. Like, don't you, Robin? Sorry, Robert, you believe in, yeah, okay, you're a Christian, but not like a particularly devout, hardcore practicing Christian. But of course, everybody is, because that's the period in which this was written. It's like everyone's denomination is Christian, otherwise you get burned. And it's like, yes, of course he is, and Scale is a clergyman, and that. But it's like, yeah, kind of that, but it's also mega spooky because it's really just like the powerful forces, like impossibly powerful forces by which everything was created, and we can also kind of learn to tap into and harness those. Which, I don't know, to me, that would be quite a terrifying revelation. Rather than, like, hey, we're all going to die and go to heaven. It's like, oh no, that's actually quite spooky. I remembered there was a bit that I appreciated, and I'm trying to find it now. It's in the first half, where like Spin Robin's spending a lot of time. This is spoilers for anyone who's come in, but don't worry, there's a lot here to go back and catch up on. It's only one little bit. But Spin Robin's spending a lot of time in the story musing on like, well, this is a strange thing that I've been called out to do, and I don't really know what's going on here. It's all a bit weird and mysterious. I wish this man would give me some answers. Meanwhile, Scale has already quite literally told him, like, we're essentially seeking to tap into and control the powers of, like, the the all-powerful powers of God and the angels. Are you okay with being completely annihilated in the course of scientific experimentation and discovery? And Spin Robin's like, yeah, no, I think I'm okay with that. That sounds cool. Anyway, what are we doing here? And there was one particular, like, way that he puts it, where it's like, we need to do some kind of the experiment of... He kind of names some kind of experiment that they intend to conduct, and it's like the very millennial of him, just like, yeah, you know what, let her rip. That's it, yeah. Before I can tell you all, I must submit you, for your own sake, to certain tests. I must submit you to certain tests, chiefly to the test of alteration of form by sound. I'm Clergyman Philip Scale, welcome to Jackass. Here we have just an enormous bank of speakers pinched from Wembley Arena, and one tiny man, Robert Spin Robin. We've cranked everything up to 11, and we're going to see just how much this altered this guy's flesh. Are you okay with that? Yeah, sure. Why not? That sounds like a lark. Let's go. Like, that's... My dude, pace. I know you're somewhat enamoured with Miriam here, who you're clearly very taken with. Maybe pay some attention to what you've just signed up to, because your flesh is going to be altered by sound, and I don't know anyone to whom that sounds like a particularly appealing prospect. Just saying. Anyway. This is why we need a quote bot. I'm Clergyman Philip Scale, welcome to Jackass College. Yeah, I know. Oh. But I'm far too lazy. Are we keeping these anywhere in case we do ever concoct a quote bot? I don't know. Right. I'm gonna go. Where do you want to go? Blue Skittle is on. You want to go see Blue Skittle? You like Blue Skittle. Blue Skittle's good. They are very soft-spoken. They are definitely not a cat. And, they actually, yeah, that's perfect theming. Cat themes. Dave was playing cat game. This had nothing to do with cats, but Joey was here. And Blue Skittle is definitely not a cat, but does very good art that is full of cats. So let's go over. Let's go over there. You thanking me for the stream? Well, I'm thanking you for being here. Thank you very much. Right, yeah, in theory, I think we will be back on Wednesday. Oh, actually, no, we might, possibly, even, maybe, circumstances permitting, be back on Monday for our, definitely we didn't forget about it until the end of the month, regularly scheduled Chiletra Tea, where Lucy and I will hopefully show our faces and talk to you about things, what we've been up to and what we're going to be up to, and maybe play a bit of a video game afterwards. Who knows? So yeah, that's hopefully possibly happening on Monday. We shall see. And then she should be back on Wednesday, but we will know. There will be a schedule posted on the Discord. But otherwise, yeah, thank you all so much for being here. You've been a wonderful, lovely audience as always. Go and say hello to Blue Skittle. If you are not already following the channel, follow the channel. It's a good channel. I like to go and hang out there. And I, or we, will see you on the next one. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.